When did mistaken identity wreck your life and leave you begging strangers for validation? I swear to God, if I have to see one more email from HR about mandatory diversity training, I am going to key someone's Lexus in the parking lot. And yes, I am 75 years old and my keys are sharpened. I literally cannot handle this week. I just found out the reason my support group is now completely broken, and I am banned from the local Starbucks near the community center, is all because of a massive, life-altering case of mistaken identity involving a 59-year-old woman who thinks gay people cause hurricanes and a 20-year-old girl who needs to find a new hobby that isn't lying to senior citizens. I don't even know where to start with this, honestly. It's Tuesday at 11:47 a.m., and I'm sitting in my 2018 Honda Civic, which smells vaguely of old Talenti gelato because I stress ate the pistachio flavor Sunday night in the back corner of the Target parking lot. I came here for toilet paper and a bottle of Pinot Noir, but now I'm just here typing this out because my hands are shaking so much I can't hold my iPhone 14 steady enough to shop. I need to vent this entire story, and I am begging you internet strangers, tell me if I'm the asshole here, because I feel like I committed an actual felony, but I was just trying to follow the rules, you know? Malicious compliance is my new favorite sport, apparently. Let's back up 3 weeks. I go to a weekly support group called Silver Linings at the community center in apartment 3B. It's weirdly in an apartment complex. Don't ask, every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. It's technically for elder wellness and emotional resilience, which sounds totally corporate and fake, but it's really just 8 of us trying to deal with life, loss, and the ever-present threat of Medicare paperwork. I'm Grace Brown, 75F, and I've been fighting depression, the kind that makes you want to stay in bed and watch Hulu for 3 days straight for years. The group helps. It really does. Lately, though, the group has been stressful, and it all boils down to 2 specific people who, trust me, were sent straight from the pits of hell. First, there's Catherine Ivanov, 59F. Catherine is the kind of woman who wears pearl necklaces to the grocery store and insists on calling her daughter's partner her roommate, even though they've been together for 15 years and have joint custody of 2 miniature schnauzers. Is aggressively judgmental, constantly quotes things she misread on Facebook, and somehow manages to work homophobic comments into every single discussion, even if we are discussing the rising cost of oat milk. She's absolutely the kind of person who believes that lifestyle choices are responsible for everything bad, including the fact that her dividend checks were $347 lighter last month. Then, there's Joan Patel, 20F. Joan is not 75. Joan is 20 years old. She joined the group a month ago. Her story, which she told through dramatic sobs the first night, was that she was dealing with pre-grief because her elderly grandfather, who lived in Phoenix, was not doing well. She claimed she needed the wisdom and companionship of people who understood life's twilight stage. Now NGL, Joan has the most expressive, tragic brown eyes you have ever seen, and she's tiny. Always wore these ridiculous oversized sweaters and kept clutching a worn copy of The Great Gatsby. I mean, I love an aesthetic, but the whole thing felt performative. Joan quickly became a problem because she latched onto everyone. She would bring in baked goods Costco muffins, but she claimed she baked them, and then spend the entire session talking about her dating woes and how expensive her Starbucks venti latte habit was, even though the focus was supposed to be on, surviving the day. She'd constantly interrupt me when I was talking about my difficulty getting my insurance to cover my new anxiety meds. She'd be texting the entire time. I saw her TikTok notifications pop up once 47 unread. I mentioned this to my friend Andrea Foster, 44F. Andrea is technically younger, but she's the unofficial group manager because she has the organizational skills of a tactical military unit. Andrea is sharp, funny, and usually the first one to call out BS. I love her, but she also loves drama. She has a real knack for stirring the pot and then sitting back to watch the boil. She later confessed she screenshotted Catherine's profile pic once just to show her husband how ridiculous she looked. Andrea, I am telling you, Joan is a fake, I said last week, waiting outside the coffee shop on Main Street while Andrea parked her beat-up Toyota Corolla. Don't know what her deal is, but her grief is suspiciously linked to her student loan repayment schedule. Andrea was already on the phone. Hold on, Mom needs the gate code again. Look, Grace, I agree, Joan is exhausting. But who cares? She's just a lonely kid. Catherine, though, Catherine needs to be dealt with, I sighed. Catherine had been particularly vile the week before. I spent 20 solid minutes discussing how the only reason she had to pay an $85 plumber charge was because her neighbor's nephew, who was apparently gay, had left the water running to spite her. She literally said, "It's the moral decay, you see. It seeps into the infrastructure." It's infuriating, I admitted. I wanted to slam my Talenti spoon down and tell her to shut up. Well, Grace, Andrea said, finally getting off the phone, I have a plan. It's a bit extreme, but I think it will solve the Catherine problem and force Joan to stop hogging the spotlight. And this is where past me was an absolute idiot. I should have immediately asked for details. I should have known any plan Andrea has is borderline illegal. But I was tired. I was worried about my $1,247 rent payment, and I just wanted Catherine to stop talking about moral decay. What is it? I asked. Core issue, Andrea explained, sipping her gas station coffee, is that Catherine feels entitled to control the narrative. She thinks she's superior. The only way to shut her down is to make her compliant. Maliciously so, we need a written official rule that forces her to behave. I stared at her. We're in a community center apartment building, Andrea. We don't have rule books. Our only rule is don't talk about politics unless it involves a really funny election campaign ad. Exactly. We can have a rule. I did some digging. The official charter for Silver Linings, which the center signed 2 years and 8 months ago, states that any 3 founding members can propose a behavioral amendment, provided it's written in formal, legalese language and approved by a 2/3 majority of attendees present. I know this sounds too official, but Andrea, remember, is a literal organizing machine. She lives for this kind of paperwork. Okay, so we propose a rule, I said. What rule? Andrea leaned in, her eyes gleaming. We need to make a rule so specific, so restrictive, that Catherine will comply out of fear of being legally wrong, but the rule itself will be so ridiculous it will strip her of all power. We target her core complaints. We spent the next 2 hours at Panera, drafting what we called the compliance clause. We ordered 2 Chipotle bowls because we were too intense to walk anywhere else. The final draft, which Andrea typed out on her ancient laptop, battery dying at 3% the entire time, was glorious in its absurdity. It was about 400 words long, referencing everything from the non-derogatory language clause to the inherent right to personal financial privacy in all group discussions. The key component, the part designed to neuter Catherine, was Article 4, subsection B, clause regarding relational integrity disclosure. All members shall strictly adhere to a policy of explicit and literal disclosure regarding the nature of their domestic or familial relationships when referencing such relationships within the context of emotional sharing. This requires using the single most direct and unambiguous term possible to describe the legal or established social status of the reference person, e.g., husband, wife, partner, child, sibling, in-law. Euphemisms, misleading labels, or deliberate avoidance of the most precise term are considered violations of group trust and emotional transparency. It was designed specifically to stop Catherine from calling her daughter's wife her roommate. If she wanted to share, she had to say in-law or daughter's wife. If she didn't, she was violating the core tenets of the group's emotional transparency. This is genius, Andrea, I whispered, feeling a giddy rush of pre-revenge adrenaline. She has to admit her daughter is gay, or she can't talk about her. Better, Andrea smirked. She has to use the correct term, or she violates the rule. Compliance, but deeply humiliating compliance. We got the required 3 signatures, mine, Andrea's, and an extremely bored guy named Robert who only attends because his wife makes him. We presented the motion last Wednesday. Catherine naturally went ballistic. This is censorship, she shrieked, dropping her purse, which contained, I kid you not, a half-eaten bag of microwave popcorn. This is political correctness gone mad. Who came up with this garbage? Andrea, completely deadpan, read the entire thing aloud, emphasizing the legalese like she was addressing the Supreme Court. She then informed Catherine that the motion was presented in the interest of clarifying communication standards, and that voting was mandatory. We voted. It passed 6-2. Catherine and Robert, who woke up long enough to vote no, were the dissenters. The compliance clause was officially in effect. Catherine was livid. She sat silently for the rest of the meeting, crossing her arms, looking like she was planning a hostile takeover. It was fantastic. The very next day, Thursday, things started to go sideways. I got a text message from Andrea around 10:00 a.m. Andrea, you seeing this BS? Me? What BS? Did Catherine post something on Nextdoor again? Andrea, worse. Check the Silver Linings chat. Use a group chat on Signal, because Catherine thinks Facebook spies on her and the rest of us just hate Mark Zuckerberg. I opened it up. Joan Patel, 20F, had posted a long, rambling message about how the new compliance rule was totally necessary because she, Joan, had been living a lie, and the stress of her fake relationships was crippling her. She finished by saying she was ready to disclose the truth about her situation next week, using the new strict compliance language. Oh great, more Joan drama. What is she lying about now? The muffins being store-bought? Andrea, read her last message. She just triple texted. I scrolled down. Joan, I'm serious, guys. It feels good to finally be real. My situation is complicated, but it needs to be said. I need to be 100% compliant. Next week I will tell you everything. Just know I am here because of my relationship with Grace Brown, 75F. My stomach dropped. I physically felt the blood leave my face and I almost dropped my phone, which thankfully had a good case because it was my iPhone 14. Me, wait what, Andrea, you see? The audacity, what the literal fuck? I texted Andrea back immediately. I was literally shaking. My hands started sweating, making the phone slippery. Me, why is she saying she's here because of her relationship with me? I barely speak to her. I avoid her. I only know she exists because she interrupts me to talk about her Hulu subscription. Andrea, I called her. She didn't pick up. She sent me a text saying she's following the new rule, explicit and literal disclosure regarding the nature of their domestic or familial relationships. Me, but we don't have a relationship. We are acquaintances in a grief group. Andrea, I tried to tell her that. She said she was being maliciously compliant because she was tired of me suggesting she was fake. She claims she's adhering to the spirit of the rule by disclosing the truth about why she came to the group. Me, but why me? What did I do? Andrea, she said Grace is my source of group trauma and therefore my primary group relationship. Girl, I think this girl is obsessed with you. Also, she has never once talked about her supposed dying grandfather since she joined. I think that was always the lie. I felt dizzy. Realization hit me. Joan wasn't just attention-seeking. She was directly using the rule we created to target Catherine, but applying it in a warped, psychotic way to center herself around me. She was being maliciously compliant, but I was the victim. I spent the rest of Thursday and all of Friday in a state of high anxiety. I couldn't focus on anything. I was supposed to be doing my quarterly inventory report for work, but I was just scrolling Zillow looking at apartments I couldn't afford if I had to move out of my current place. Rent is $1,247, and I need every dollar. I used 3 PTO hours just sitting and staring at the wall. I kept thinking, what is she going to say? What is this truth? Is she going to claim I owe her money? Did she confuse me with someone else? I'm Grace Brown, 75, I fight depression. I buy my groceries at Trader Joe's. I am boring. I almost called Joan 27 times that day. I kept picking up the phone and then putting it down. I was afraid of what she would say. I checked the Silver Linings group chat every 5 minutes. Joan was completely silent, her red receipt mocking me. Andrea tried to calm me down. Andrea, just ignore her. She wants attention. If she says something crazy, we will shut her down. Rule isn't binding outside of the 5:30 p.m. Wednesday meeting. Me, but what if she says I'm her grandmother? Or that I stole her identity? What if she has evidence? I know, I was spiraling. But the idea of a 20-year-old being obsessed with me was terrifying. Andrea, Grace, breathe, she's Joan. She probably thinks her truth is that she's a secret YouTube celebrity who did a social experiment in senior group's video. That actually sounded plausible. Twisted relief washed over me. Okay, I can handle a social experiment. I can handle being the subject of a TikTok video. Saturday arrived. I decided to ignore everything and go to Costco. I needed to focus on the mundane to stay sane. I bought the giant tub of detergent and 2 massive rotisserie chickens. I felt slightly better. Then, Saturday night, the text started, not from Joan, from Catherine Ivanov, 59F. Catherine, Grace, you and that foster woman have gone too far. This compliance rule is a weapon. You know what that little girl Joan is planning to do, don't you? Me. Catherine, I honestly have no idea what Joan is doing. I haven't spoken to her outside of the group. Catherine, lies, you are collaborating. She's using your rules to defame me. She claims she knows about my daughter. Me, your daughter? What are you talking about? Joan is talking about me. Catherine, stop gaslighting me, Grace. I never liked you anyway. Depression is clearly clouding your judgment. I'm telling the center director you engineered this whole thing so she could expose my family secrets. You know I've been trying to keep the truth about my daughter's roommate situation quiet. I slammed my iPhone down on the kitchen counter so hard I cracked my screen protector. Thank God for that $15 protector. This was a new level of insanity. Catherine thought Joan's big truth was about her and her daughter's marriage, not about me. She thought I was conspiring with Joan. I texted Andrea immediately. Me, Katie Chirani is unhinged. She thinks Joan is exposing her daughter's marriage. She thinks Joan is targeting her. Andrea, wait, what? No way. Why would Joan target Catherine? She explicitly named you. Me, Catherine is convinced Joan is just pretending to target me to distract from the real issue, forcing Catherine to use the word wife in the meeting. She's applying the compliance rule to the only thing she cares about, her own reputation. Andrea, oh my God, this is amazing. She's so paranoid about the compliance rule, she can't even process Joan's actual insanity. Me, Andrea, this isn't amazing, this is dangerous. Catherine is threatening to report me. I need this group. It's the only thing keeping me from eating Ben and Jerry's for 3 meals a day. Andrea, look, you know the drill. Low contact. Don't engage with Catherine. Don't talk to Joan. Show up Wednesday, let Joan spill her nonsense, and we will shut it down immediately. I tried to follow Andrea's advice. I spent Sunday and Monday avoiding the chat. I ordered my groceries from Amazon to avoid going out, spent $43.67 on essential pantry items, and watched 3 documentaries on Netflix. I tried to focus on the positive. I hadn't succumbed to the urge to check Joan's Instagram profile. I found it last week. It's mostly photos of her crying poetically while holding Starbucks cups. But then came Tuesday. Today, I woke up this morning and felt the dread settle deep in my chest. I couldn't eat. I could only manage half a cup of lukewarm coffee. The anxiety was so high I felt nauseous. Then, around 9:00 a.m., Joan posted again in the group chat. Om Patel, 20F, just a reminder everyone, compliance is key. I have already secured the documentation needed to verify my relationship with Grace. I promise you all you will finally understand why I need this group so desperately. See you all at 5:30. I didn't panic, I didn't scream, I didn't even drop my phone. I just felt a cold, burning rage. Documentation? What documentation could she possibly have? Did she steal my mail? Did she follow me? Immediately called Andrea. She didn't answer. I called her 27 times in 1 hour. Nothing. I checked her Find My iPhone location. She was at her office on the 5th floor, but her phone was clearly off or set to Do Not Disturb. She was avoiding me. The pot stirrer had stirred too hard and was now hiding. I got in my Honda Civic and drove. I drove to the community center. I drove to Starbucks. I drove to the grocery store, which is where I am now. And then, about 5 minutes ago, as I was sitting here trying to decide if I should buy the cheap $8 bottle of Pinot Noir or the $15 bottle, I got a text message. It wasn't from Andrea, and it wasn't from Joan. It was from a number I didn't recognize. The text read, "This is the center director. To urgent matters requiring mediation prior to the next Silver Linings meeting, I require Grace Brown, 75F, and Joan Patel, 20F, to meet me at the Community Center Apartment 3B at 2:00 p.m. today. Failure to attend will result in immediate suspension from the program. Catherine Ivanov has filed a formal complaint citing hostile environment and malicious defamation against both of you." My jaw literally dropped. Catherine beat me to the punch. She didn't wait for Joan's reveal. She used the ambiguity of Joan's previous posts and the existence of the compliance clause against me. She accused me of being the mastermind. And Joan, by being maliciously compliant and naming me as her primary relationship, just gave Catherine the ammunition she needed. I was being pulled into a mandatory mediation with a 20-year-old girl who was clearly delusional, all because I helped create a rule to shame a 59-year-old woman for being homophobic. I looked at the clock on my car dashboard. 11:54 a.m. I had 2 hours until I had to face the center director and Joan Patel, 20F, who claimed she had documentation proving our relationship. I had to know what Joan was going to say. I had to know what Catherine had accused me of. I had to get Andrea to help me prep, but she was ghosting me. I decided right then and there. Forget low contact. I was done being polite. I was done being compliant. I saw red. I put my car in reverse, leaving the Target parking lot with no toilet paper and no wine. I had to get to the community center immediately. I needed to confront Joan before the meeting and before the center director arrived. I needed to know what the hell was going on. But before I could even get 2 blocks away, I got another text. It was from the unknown number again. Correction. The required attendees are Grace Brown, 75F, Joan Patel, 20F, and Catherine Ivanov, 59F. This meeting is mandatory to discuss the dissolution of the compliance clause. Wait, they were bringing Catherine too? This wasn't mediation. This was a trap. And then a third text moments later. Final correction. Attendance is required for Grace Brown, 75F, Joan Patel, 20F, Catherine Ivanov, 59F, and Andrea Foster, 44F. She has just been added as a party of interest. Andrea, she was avoiding my calls, but she was being forced to attend? What did Catherine tell them? What had Andrea done? I was driving fast now, heart pounding, turning onto Main Street. I was shaking so violently my vision was blurry. I couldn't believe this was happening because of a support group rule. I pull up to the apartment complex where the center is located. It's a dingy brick building. Apartment 3B. I park hastily in a red zone because I literally don't care about a ticket right now. I get out of the car, slamming the door. I'm speed walking toward the entrance. I need to know why Andrea is involved, why Joan is obsessed, and why Catherine is blaming me. I reach the lobby, and there's a small sign taped to the wall near the stairwell. It's handwritten, and it's a notice from the center director. Notice, due to ongoing disputes regarding the Silver Linings Group and the new compliance clause, please note that the group is temporarily suspended pending internal review. All non-required personnel are asked to vacate the premises immediately. Only the 4 named parties may enter 3B. I felt a surge of panic. Entire group was canceled because of this mess. I walked up the 2 flights of stairs to the 3rd floor, my knees cracking with every step. I was breathing too fast. I stood outside the door of apartment 3B. I could hear muffled, angry voices inside. They were already there. It was only 1:45 p.m. I didn't knock. I just reached for the knob, ready to burst in and scream at everyone. But before I could even touch the metal, the door swung open. Standing there, looking absolutely furious, her face pale and her eyes wide with shock, was Joan Patel, 20F. She was holding a stack of papers, the documentation she had mentioned. She looked at me, then looked wildly down the hall, then back at me. She didn't look like an attention-seeking TikTok star anymore. She looked genuinely terrified. "Grace," she hissed, grabbing my arm, her fingers cold and tight. "You can't go in there. They've got it all wrong. I wasn't talking about you." I was talking about her. She shoved the papers into my hands. They were printed Zelle transaction receipts, copies of a lease agreement, and several highly detailed social media message logs. "What is this?" I whispered, staring at the stack of evidence. "I need to be compliant," Joan insisted, her voice trembling. "I have to disclose my relationship, but you and Andrea made the rule too specific. I didn't think anyone would actually believe I was talking about you. It's all because of her." He jabbed a finger, not at the closed door of 3B, but further down the hall toward the laundry room. "Who?" I asked, completely lost, staring at a Zelle receipt showing a $200 withdrawal from Joan's account, clearly labeled Rent Share Apartment 3B. Joan leaned in, whispering so frantically I could smell the cheap coffee on her breath. "Andrea Foster, 44F, she breathed. "Andrea is the one who convinced me to come here. I am her fake friend. Needed me to pretend to be an elderly person's granddaughter for a very specific reason related to this apartment complex's lease policy. And that lease? It's in her name, but she was hiding it from her husband. She said if I played along, I could live rent-free for 6 months, but I had to claim I was here for grief support related to senior. She's my landlady. That's the relationship. She's the one who is supposed to be compliant. She made me lie about the dying grandpa. I was being maliciously compliant against Andrea because I wanted the free rent without the guilt. But now Catherine thinks I was talking about her daughter, and the director thinks I was talking about you, and Andrea is in there telling everyone I'm crazy." I looked down at the documents in my hands, a lease agreement for apartment 3B, listing Andrea Foster as the primary renter and showing a full security deposit, and the Silver Linings support group. Met in the apartment Andrea was secretly renting, and then I looked back at the terrified 20-year-old girl. "So you were never a fake friend to me," I stammered. "You were a fake friend to the whole group for Andrea." Joan nodded desperately. "Yes, and Andrea knew exactly how specific that compliance rule was. She should have followed it first. She was the one who was supposed to disclose her relationship with me. But why would Andrea set up the compliance rule knowing it would expose her?" "'Cause," Joan whimpered, "she wanted Catherine to accidentally expose her own homophobic views so badly that the center director would ignore the fact that Andrea was secretly using the community center property as a tax-free rental unit." I stared at the stack of papers. The realization was physically sickening. Andrea Foster, 44F, wasn't just a pot stirrer. She was running a sophisticated, layered fraud scheme that relied on the very group meant to provide solace. She used me, used Catherine's bigotry, and she used Joan's need for cheap rent. And now all 4 of us were required to be in that room, and I was holding the literal evidence of Andrea's massive fraud, which Joan had given me in a desperate, last-ditch effort to be compliant and avoid being the sole target. I looked down at the top Zelle receipt again, $200 withdrawal. I recognized the account name immediately. It wasn't Joan's, it was Catherine Ivanov's. Wait, I was Catherine Ivanov, 59F, sending Joan Patel, 20F, $200 labeled Rent Share Apartment 3B? My head spun. Joan wasn't renting from Andrea. Joan was sending money to Katie Chirani. "Joan," I managed, my voice strained. "Who are you paying rent to?" Joan swallowed hard, glancing nervously at the door of 3B. "Catherine Ivanov," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "I was only lying about the dying grandfather for Andrea, but I am paying Catherine rent. She's renting out the 2nd bedroom in 3B, which she's supposed to be using for support materials storage. Andrea is mad because Catherine is undercutting her rental scam. I am Catherine's literal in-law. I am dating her nephew, who she despises. She knows I am here. That's why she's so angry about the compliance rule. If she has to disclose our literal relationship, she has to admit I am her nephew's partner, and she's using the center property for personal profit by renting to me. That's the truth. I'm here because of my relationship with Catherine Ivanov." I gripped the documents so hard they crinkled. Had walked into a mediation meeting where I was being accused of malicious defamation by a woman who was committing housing fraud by renting the community center apartment to a 20-year-old who was dating her nephew, and who had created a compliance rule with another woman who was also trying to secretly rent the same apartment, all while thinking Joan was talking about me. The door to apartment 3B opened again, and a voice the center directors boomed out. "Joan, get back in here. Grace Brown, are you coming? We need to address the issue of your malicious compliance immediately." I stood outside the door of apartment 3B, clutching the stack of highly incriminating documents Joan Patel, 20F, had just thrust into my sweaty hands. My brain was performing the kind of slow, excruciating crash you see in old NASA footage when the rocket booster fails. I had come here to confront a delusional young woman who I thought was obsessed with me, was prepared to argue about my Hulu subscription and maybe my identity. Instead, I had uncovered a multi-layered, community center-adjacent real estate fraud scheme involving my supposed ally Andrea Foster, 44F, and my bigoted nemesis, Catherine Ivanov, 59F. I looked at Joan. She was still shaking, her eyes darting between me and the closed door. Wait, I whispered, holding up the Zelle receipt showing Catherine's account sending money to Joan. If you are dating Catherine's nephew, and she hates gay people, and she is collecting rent from you here, in the place where she complains about your lifestyle choices, this is her way of punishing you and profiting off you at the same time? Joan nodded frantically, tears welling up. Yes, but she thinks because she charges me under market rate, she's being compliant with her familial duties while maintaining her personal beliefs. She calls it moral tariff. She told me I had to pretend to be a niece or grandniece or something in case anyone from the community center ever saw us together outside of group. But then Andrea started getting suspicious because Andrea needed 3B for her secret rental scam, which is why she brought me in under the dying grandpa lie in the first place. They are fighting over the use of community center space. Grace? I felt faint. I leaned against the wall. Entire Silver Linings support group was just a cover for two middle-aged women's fraudulent side hustles. But the compliance clause, I said, pointing at the documents. You said you were being maliciously compliant against Andrea. I was, because Andrea was threatening to expose me to Catherine if I didn't stop talking about my actual dating life in the group. She wanted me focused on the fake grandpa, but the rule said I had to use the single most direct and unambiguous term for my relationship. If I disclosed I was paying rent to Catherine Ivanov, I had to disclose the truth about my dating life, which makes me Catherine's in-law and proves she's running a rental scheme in 3B that was my way of threatening both of them if they didn't leave me alone. She paused, taking a huge, shaky breath. But then when I named you, Joan continued, gesturing toward my name on the document stack, I was talking about my relationship with Andrea's fake story. The fake story was that I was here for you, Grace. I was trying to be compliant with the lie I was forced into. I thought everyone would realize it was an ironic joke about the fake friend situation, but Catherine immediately assumed I was talking about her family situation because she's paranoid about the compliance clause, and Andrea just let everyone think I was talking about you because she wanted me discredited before I could expose her lease. Joan Patel, 20F, was not a sociopathic attention seeker. She was a stressed-out 20-year-old caught between two deeply malicious, competing landlords who were using a senior support group as cover for housing fraud and internal turf wars. She tried to use the compliance clause against her immediate threat, Andrea/Catherine, but she was too specific and ended up making me the collateral damage. Before I could process that I was about to walk into an apartment that was simultaneously Catherine's illegal rental unit and Andrea's target rental unit, the center director's voice boomed again. Grace Brown, Joan, move it. The door to 3B swung wide open, and the center director, a stern woman named Ms. Henderson, who looks like she eats iron filings for breakfast, was standing there, arms crossed. Behind her, I could see Catherine and Andrea sitting at a folding card table, both looking like they were ready to commit murder. Ms. Henderson eyed the documents in my hands. What is that? Are you attempting to distribute evidence outside of the mediation, Grace? Joan panicked. She snatched the papers back and shoved them down the front of her enormous sweatshirt. No, ma'am, just my notes. I have very detailed notes. Joan squeaked, sidling past Ms. Henderson and taking a seat at the card table next to a glowering Catherine. I took a deep breath. Okay, low contact was out the window. My new strategy was malicious honesty. Yes, Ms. Henderson, I said, walking into the room. I am here, and I believe we need to start this mediation with a very strict adherence to Article 4, subsection B, clause regarding relational integrity disclosure. Catherine Ivanov's face went from angry to horrified in about 2 seconds flat. She recognized the threat immediately. That clause is dissolved. It's been suspended pending review, Catherine shrieked, pointing at me with a shaky finger. Actually, Catherine, I said, trying to sound calm even though my heart was jackhammering against my ribs. The text message I received only stated the group was suspended. The clause itself has not been officially voided through the required 3-member petition and 2/3 vote, as per the original charter. Therefore, any discussion of relationships in this room must adhere to the rule. Andrea Foster, 44F, looked absolutely stunned, but she recovered quickly. She saw a way to pivot the blame back onto Catherine, who was currently her chief rival in the illegal rental market war. Andrea smiled weakly. Grace is right, Andrea chirped, adopting her tactical manager voice. For the sake of transparency, we must adhere to the clause while we discuss why it became weaponized. Catherine shot Andrea a look that promised a slow and agonizing death. Ms. Henderson sighed, rubbing her temples. Fine, compliance it is. You're here, Grace, because Catherine has filed a complaint stating that you and Joan were conspiring to use the compliance clause to maliciously expose her daughter's legal relationship status, causing extreme emotional distress and disrupting the environment of the community center. That is a lie, I stated plainly. I pointed at Joan. Joan Patel 20F was never referencing Catherine Ivanov's daughter. She was referencing her own relationship with a primary member of this group, as required by the clause. I will now ask Joan to comply with the rule and state her relationship with Catherine Ivanov. Joan gasped, her eyes wide with terror and relief. She had handed me the ammunition, and now I was firing it for her. My relationship with Catherine Ivanov is, Joan started, glancing nervously at Catherine. Catherine leaned across the table, hissing, Joan, if you say one word, you will find yourself homeless by the end of the day. Do you understand, you little brat? Ms. Henderson slammed her hand on the table. Catherine, that is absolutely unacceptable behavior. Joan, speak. Joan took a huge gulp of air. I am Catherine Ivanov's nephew's domestic partner, also known as her in-law. And I am also her tenant in this apartment, 3B, which she rents to me for $450 a month. Silence, dead silence. Ms. Henderson stared at Catherine. Catherine, who was beet red, was sputtering incoherently. Andrea Foster just sat there, trying very hard to hide a giant smirk, because this exposed Catherine's fraud, making Andrea look comparatively innocent for about 30 seconds. Ms. Henderson looked down at a clipboard. Catherine, are you confirming that you are operating a private sublet business within a community center apartment designated for support group activities, and that your tenant is your relative by marriage, a young woman whose lifestyle choices you frequently condemned within the group? Catherine finally managed a sentence. She is lying. She's a liar. She's working for Grace to ruin me. I am not, Joan cried, pulling the stack of documents out of her sweater. I have the Zelle receipts and the lease agreement. Ms. Henderson snatched the papers. She flipped through them, her face getting harder with every page. She reached the bottom and looked up at Andrea. Andrea Foster, these documents show that apartment 3B is leased to Catherine Ivanov, but there are multiple messages from you to Joan Patel confirming that you advised her to lie to the group about her circumstances. And in one message, you state that you plan to leverage Catherine's homophobia to get Ms. Henderson to overlook the fact that you were preparing to rent out this space as well. Is that correct? Bam. Plot twist from the center director. Joan didn't tell me Andrea was also exposed in the documentation. Joan only focused on the parts that exposed Catherine and protected Joan. Andrea's face fell instantly. Her smugness evaporated. She looked exactly like a small child who had been caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and the evidence was dripping down their chin. Ms. Henderson, I was merely acting in the best interest of group morale. I was trying to stop the fighting. I was engaging in a theoretical discussion about the best way to handle Catherine's negativity, Andrea stammered. Theoretical discussion that involved you promising Joan 6 months of rent-free living if she participated in a group-wide deception about a dying grandfather? Ms. Henderson asked, raising an eyebrow. It was a social experiment, Andrea yelled, finally cracking. I was trying to prove a point about emotional vulnerability in senior living spaces. I stood there completely peripheral to the explosion I had triggered. I was just the compliance mechanism. I was the person who was wrongly accused, but whose defense immediately collapsed the two people who were actually guilty of fraud and exploitation. Malicious compliance, indeed. Ms. Henderson pushed the documents back across the table. She looked at Joan, Catherine, and Andrea. You three are suspended indefinitely. The support group is permanently disbanded. It will be pursuing legal action regarding the misuse of community center property, pending the full review of these documents. She turned to me. I braced myself for the final verdict, expecting a lecture about poor judgment. Grace Brown, Ms. Henderson said, your only involvement in this cluster mess was creating the rule that ultimately exposed this entire scheme. However, your decision to target one specific member using highly restrictive language does indicate a tendency toward hostile compliance. For the moment, you are free of any charges, but I suggest you find a support group that meets in a less legally compromised location. I nodded dumbly. I was free, but I was groupless. I turned and walked out of 3B. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. I just needed air. I power walked down the stairs, heart still pounding, got back into my Honda Civic and drove away. So that was Tuesday afternoon. 2 hours of intense, chaotic confrontation that ended my support group, exposed 2 fraudsters, and exonerated me technically. But I was still vibrating with nervous energy. I drove straight home. I didn't get the Pinot Noir or the toilet paper. I sat on my couch and stared at the wall for 2 full hours. Okay, so I need to update you on what happened after that. Fast forward to Friday. A lot happened between Tuesday and Friday. First, I had to deal with the fallout. The Signal chat group exploded. People were demanding answers. The guy named Robert, who only showed up because his wife made him, posted a rambling message about how he always knew something was up with the lighting in 3B, and maybe they were using UV lamps to grow marijuana. I just muted the chat. I couldn't handle the BS. I got 3 voicemails from Andrea. I listened to the first one. She was hysterical. Grace, you have to help me. Catherine is blaming me for everything. She told Ms. Henderson that I engineered the whole thing to take over her unit. I need you to confirm that the compliance clause was your idea, not mine. We are friends. You can't let me take the fall for this. GL, hearing her beg was satisfying for about 3.5 seconds, and then I realized how deeply betrayed I felt. She used me. She saw Catherine's bigotry and my depression and thought, how can I leverage this to get a cheap apartment? I deleted the other 2 voicemails without listening. Low contact starts now. Forever contact, actually. Catherine Ivanov tried a different approach. She sent me a long email via the community center directory. How she got my email, I don't know. Probably the same way she figured out how to rent the apartment illegally. The subject line was urgent reconciliation needed. The email was a masterpiece of denial and projection. She claimed that she and I were both victims of Joan and Andrea, who were clearly running a highly sophisticated, anti-elderly organized crime ring. He then attempted to bond with me over our shared trauma, saying, as 2 women who understand the complexities of familial obligations, my in-law problem, your supposed relationship with Joan, We must stick together against the millennials. She finished by asking if I could write a letter to the center director, confirming that she had been acting in the group's best interest when she demanded the dissolution of the compliance rule. I reread that email 3 times. He didn't once apologize for accusing me of malicious defamation. She only saw me as a tool to get her rental unit back. I responded with one sentence. Me, please refer to Article 4 subsection B clause regarding relational integrity disclosure. And then I blocked her email. I know, it was immature, but it was so satisfying. That woman literally cannot be communicated with outside of legal terminology. The only person I felt genuine concern for was Joan. She was the one who was truly vulnerable, caught between 2 predators. She helped me inadvertently, but I still needed to check on her. I texted her Thursday afternoon. Me, are you okay? Did Catherine kick you out of 3B? Joan texted back instantly. Joan, she tried, but I still have a copy of the lease. And I talked to her nephew. He says he's taking the documentation to the housing authority. Now Catherine is in deep trouble and I have until the end of the month to find a new place. I'm staying with the nephew until then. Me, I am so sorry you got dragged into this. Joan, honestly, I'm kind of relieved. I hated pretending my grandpa was dying. He's totally fine, BTW. He lives in Boca, not Phoenix. He's learning pickleball. Me, good to hear. Joan, thank you, Grace. I really am sorry I used your name in the chat. Honestly thought it was so absurd no one would believe it. Me, malicious compliance always has collateral damage, I guess. Joan, LOL. TBH, I did feel really bad about all the interruptions when you were talking about the insurance meds. I was stressing about the rent and I couldn't focus. I'm going to find an actual support group now. Me, good idea. Maybe one that doesn't meet in a community center rental property. Joan, deal. Thanks, Grace Brown, 75F. He sent me a smiley face emoji, which I can't reproduce here, but it was a genuine one. I realized that Joan, under all the performance art, was just a kid desperate to get by, who got manipulated by the real villains. I unblocked her number, just in case. A week went by where I felt like I was floating slightly above my body. I still hadn't replaced the toilet paper or the Pinot Noir. I was eating a lot of instant oatmeal. I felt immense relief that the drama was over, but also intense sadness. The group was gone. It was messy, but it was helping my depression. Now I was alone again. I had used the 3 PTO hours on Tuesday, and my boss, who is literally 30 years old and has very firm boundaries, texted me on Wednesday asking for the quarterly inventory report. I couldn't focus on spreadsheets, so I told him I had a sudden bout of food poisoning from a bad rotisserie chicken from Costco. I know, I lied, but I was still trying to recover emotionally. By Tuesday morning, 1 week after the mediation, I felt ready to face the world. I needed to get out of the house. I had saved up my energy. I decided to go to the Starbucks near the community center. Remember how I said I was banned from that Starbucks? That's the next update. I pulled up to the Starbucks drive-thru. I ordered a venti iced coffee with oat milk. I'm embracing the things Catherine hated, clearly, and pulled forward to the window. The barista, a nice young man named Leo who usually calls me ma'am, looked incredibly awkward when I pulled up. Grace, he said, handing me the drink. Listen, I'm really sorry about this, but we can't serve you here anymore. What? Why? I asked, completely shocked. I tipped well. I never complained about the complex name pronunciations. Leo whispered, leaning close to the window. We got a formal request from the community center director. She said, and I quote, Grace Brown, 75F, has been officially banned from accessing premises within 500 feet of apartment 3B due to her role in the dissolution of the Silver Linings Group and the use of the Starbucks adjacent patio for unauthorized distribution of compliance-related documentation. I stared at him. The patio? I was never on the patio. Catherine Ivanov reported that you and Joan Patel met there to exchange illegal documents that defamed her, Leo explained, looking pained. She included timestamps from security footage and a very detailed drawing of your car. Ms. Henderson backed her up because Catherine claimed you were trying to evade the no-contact order. I realized what must have happened. Catherine, obsessed with proving the compliance clause was a weapon against her, must have seen Joan and I talking outside 3B and assumed we were conspiring. And Joan, in her panic, must have mentioned to Catherine that she had been at Starbucks the week before, waiting for me. Catherine connected the dots to make up a false narrative that included the Starbucks patio. She just needed a reason to ban me and keep me away from the community center and possibly away from Joan. The kicker. Rule was low contact. I was trying to maintain low contact with Joan and Catherine, but Catherine convinced the center director that I was violating the mandated low contact zone by simply existing within 500 feet of 3B. This was the final piece of malicious compliance aimed squarely at me. The very rule I helped create was being used to ban me from my favorite coffee shop based on a lie fabricated by the very person the rule was designed to control. Are you serious? I asked Leo. Dead serious. The ban is for 90 days. We were told to call the police if you linger. I sighed, defeated. I drove away from Starbucks, my venti iced coffee clutched in my hand. It was the best tasting, most illegally acquired coffee I had ever consumed. So I'm typing this update from my actual kitchen table, 2 weeks after the mediation. The anxiety has mostly subsided, replaced by a dull, constant exhaustion. I'm eating ice cream again, but only 1 scoop a night, which is progress. I have achieved low contact, but not in the way I wanted. I'm physically unable to contact any of them near the community center, and I blocked them all anyway. The biggest ongoing fallout is with Andrea. I did something I never would have done before. I decided to be completely honest with her husband, David. David is a really sweet guy. He's an accountant and extremely boring, which is why Andrea loved stirring the pot so much she was always bored. I ran into him at Trader Joe's. I have switched to the next neighborhood over for my groceries. He looked stressed out. He asked about the group. David, I said, putting my organic kale back in the bin. We need to talk. The group is gone, and Andrea is in a lot of trouble. I laid out the entire story, detailing the compliance clause, the two competing rental schemes, Joan's fake grandpa, and how Andrea used me as leverage against Catherine. I showed him the screenshots of Andrea's frantic messages and the parts of the lease documents Joan had shared with me earlier that week that implicated Andrea's intent to rent 3B. I saw the exact moment David realized his wife was not just a pot stirrer, but a criminal trying to use a senior support group to run a tax dodge. His face went pale, exactly like mine did when I read Joan's initial text. David spent 20 minutes just staring at the floor. I need to leave now, Grace, he finally mumbled, dropping his basket of frozen chicken tikka masala. Thank you for telling me the truth. I guess I was compliant with her lies. I felt bad, TBH. I know I destroyed his marriage, but she was never going to stop the lies, and if I had kept quiet, she would have continued to use me. Setting boundaries sometimes involves massive collateral damage. Update. 3 days after my conversation with David, he called me. David, Andrea has moved out. She's staying with her sister in Tacoma. The center director is involving the police, and she's going to need a lawyer. She claims she was just helping the elderly community by offering discounted storage space, but the messages prove otherwise. Me, I'm sorry, David. David, don't be. She showed me the messages you sent her when she was begging you for help. You didn't respond. I appreciate that. You were setting a boundary I should have set years ago. He then asked me a very interesting question. David, Grace, do you know if Andrea had any sort of investment in that Panera stock? She spent 2 hours there drawing up that legal document with you, and she charged the Chipotle bowls to our joint credit card. She's supposed to be on a no fast food diet. Me? Wait, she charged those bowls to the card? David? Yes, $37.42. She claimed it was a business lunch. This was a small, satisfying piece of mundane reality. Andrea's massive fraud scheme, which led to the dissolution of my support group and my banishment from my favorite Starbucks, was fundamentally rooted in her inability to stop lying about her Chipotle consumption. I felt a genuine, uncontrolled laugh bubble up. I actually laughed out loud, right there on the phone with David. It was the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. No, David, I said, catching my breath. She does not own Panera stock, and she definitely stress ate those bowls. Talked for another few minutes. He's going to be okay. He's going to deal with the divorce, the lawyers, and the realization that his wife was a chaos agent. He has boundaries now too. So where am I now? 3 weeks later. The Silver Linings Group is gone. The community center apartment 3B is empty, pending a complete lease and usage audit by the city. Catherine Ivanov is currently fighting the city's housing authority and trying to blame the entire thing on Joan's inappropriate relationship. Luck with that, Catherine. Andrea is lying low, presumably figuring out how to comply with her sister's house rules, which I hope involve very strict documentation of all Chipotle expenditures. Joan Patel is living with her nice, non-homophobic nephew boyfriend, and finally getting honest therapy for her anxiety and her compulsive lying tendencies. She texted me yesterday saying she found a new group that meets at a church basement, and they serve actual baked goods, not Costco muffins. I'm genuinely happy for her. And me, Grace Brown, 75F, I'm still fighting the depression. I still stress ate a pint of Talenti pistachio last night. I still have to figure out the Medicare paperwork, which is a fresh hell every day. But I learned something important about boundaries and compliance. I realized that low contact is not just about avoiding people, it's about avoiding situations that force you into compromise. I compromised my better judgment when I let Andrea push me into drafting that ridiculous legal document. I was so focused on making Catherine compliant that I became compliant myself, blindly following Andrea's lead into a trap. The real malicious compliance wasn't the rule itself. It was my willingness to let my anger toward Catherine override my instincts about Andrea and Joan. I found a new support group. Meets at the local library, which has excellent soundproofing, and the only rules are be kind and no discussing the cost of oat milk. I'm going next week. I'm nervous, but I'm going. I also finally drove to Target and got the toilet paper. I skipped the Pinot Noir. Instead, I bought a new heavy-duty phone case, because clearly my life involves too much accidental evidence dropping to rely on flimsy plastic. I am not the asshole here, internet strangers. I was the victim of mistaken identity and emotional exploitation. But I was also the mechanism of destruction, and I'm okay with that. Sometimes, being maliciously compliant with the truth is the only way to get true justice. I still miss the old group, though. It was chaotic, but it was my chaos. Now I have to find new people to complain about. I hear the librarian is very opinionated about the Dewey Decimal System. Wish me luck. Anyway, that's the update. My life is still a mess, but at least the rent for apartment 3B is no longer my problem. We'll update if Catherine tries to use the community garden plot as an Airbnb. I wouldn't put it past her.